Hey guys, welcome to Topical. Nate here. Today we're doing over/under for 1970s movies, where Strange Wang is going to give me a movie from the 1970s. We're going to say if it's overrated or underrated and tell you why.
The Godfather. What people say is the greatest film of all time.
Yeah, I gotta say, well, okay, so part of me wants to say slightly underrated, and that's just because I know a lot of people say that The Godfather 2 is better than The Godfather 1, and I disagree. I think The Godfather 1 is just a touch better. But in reality, I mean, they're neck and neck. The movie's perfectly rated. It gets all the praise it deserves, nothing less.
Annie Hall.
I think that movie's a little overrated. People talk about it a lot. People talk about it being Woody Allen's best movie. It's not that good. It's fine. I understand why, like in 1970, and then maybe as it grew in appreciation through the 80s and 90s, people were crazy about it just because, you know, he has a very, like, it's not your, like, super typical type of filmmaking. Like, he's got his own style. It really stands out. It doesn't really look like anything else, but it's fine. It's not that great.
Alien.
Alien's... that's perfectly rated. I mean, people like Alien.
You don't think the sequels taint it?
No, I think that's stupid. Don't ever let a sequel taint a good movie. Who gives a shit? Don't ever watch the sequel. Just watch the good one.
There's two good ones. Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
I'm going to say I think that's slightly underrated. I think Close Encounters of the Third Kind is an incredible movie. It's very good. But I feel like if you're going to talk about, like, if you're talking about Steven Spielberg's greatest movies, you're not making a list. You're just having a general conversation about, like, Spielberg's best films. I feel like this one kind of disappears from the conversation when you're talking about it with anyone who's, like, under 40, because you don't hear about Close Encounters like you hear about E.T. So a lot of people went back and watched E.T. because you hear about E.T. all the time. Not a lot of people really go back and watch Close Encounters. So I think it deserves a little bit more love than it gets.
Apocalypse soon? Just kidding. It's Apocalypse now.
Yeah, this one's kind of tough. I think Apocalypse Now gets talked about a lot, but it's another one of those movies where it's like a lot of people really kind of talk about like one or two scenes from it, right? Everyone talks about like the final Marlon Brando scene, the horror, all that good stuff. But if you only know that movie for this, then you should go watch that movie, because that movie is really fucking weird. And I personally love it. I love how weird it is. So I'm going to say I think it's a little bit underrated because people only talk about that one specific thing from it, when there's just like so much weird shit that happens in that movie that I think should be talked about just as much.
Taxi Driver. Wrong.
I think Taxi Driver is a little overrated. I appreciate like this specific, like, almost subgenre that it's in. The like vigilante, the anti-hero, he, you know, sees the problems with society and does what he thinks is something about it, like, style of movie. But Taxi Driver is just like, it's really hard for me personally to have a ton of sympathy for this character, which that is almost necessary if you're going to make that kind of movie. I don't really connect with him. I don't ever really care about him. I understand the movie has a lot to say with like how we treat veterans and stuff like that, and all of that stuff is good and important in a conversation we need to have. But I don't think Taxi Driver really does a super great job of putting a ton of light on that. And I also, this is one of those movies that, like, just the way that a lot of 70s movies were filmed, they just look gross and grimy and dirty, and it's just not for me. So, say a little overrated.
Slightly surprised by that, because the big motivation in the film turns out to be him ending an underage pimp's thing, and you're very you have strong feelings about that. So slightly surprised, slightly not surprised.
I know. I understand what his action is, but his like mentality in general behind it is just like, this ain't it, dog.
But you know who didn't break up a underage prostitute crime ring?
Who?
Superman. In the movie Superman.
The
movie.
Well, geez, I don't know. What is this movie? I don't think this is a bad movie. I kind of enjoy this movie a little bit, and I like really don't like Superman at all. He's probably one of my least favorite superheroes. But this movie really isn't that bad, and they did a lot. Like the things that they did in this movie with like 1970s technology isn't like Star Wars level good, but it's still pretty good. So I'm gonna say this is a little bit underrated because I feel like the Donner Supermans and like a lot of these older superhero movies that are pretty good just get so lost in the shuffle now with all the MCUs and the DCEU or whatever the fuck they call it, and your Snyderverse, which is apparently sort of a thing now, and people should go back and watch these movies more, in my personal opinion.
You're a big fan of him on Fury Road, but how do you feel about the original Mad Max?
It's fine. I think it's perfectly rated. I mean, it obviously made a big enough impact to where we got. I don't know. I'm still really not super clear on whether or not Fury Road is a reboot or some sort of weird sequel or a prequel or whatever. So Mad Max stood the test of time. It was like the right kind of like off the beaten path movie. I feel like the 70s are really when like dystopian type movies really got their the ball rolling, and I appreciate them for that because some like dystopian type movies are really really freaking good. So I think Mad Max laid the groundwork for a lot of stuff that came later, and I think it gets those props. So I'm gonna say perfectly rated.
Rocky Road ice cream is a flavor that might be in this movie, and is Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
Are you going to ask me about Rocky?
No, I never plan on bringing it up.
I might talk about it anyways, just so you can cut it out. Willy Wonka. Part of me wants to say underrated, because again, this movie is just... Actually, I am going to say underrated. I think this movie is remembered really well, but I don't like the reasons that it's remembered. A lot of people treat this as like a children's movie, and I'm not saying it's not, but this movie is really dark. It is really weird. It has spawned a ton of like really interesting internet fan theories through the ages. The reason I say overrated is because the really weird Johnny Depp one has this like odd cult following now, and I'm not saying that one's bad either, but I just love the original one. Like, I love its tone. I love like the oddities. Like, it's a complete spectacle. I love talking shit about how freaking... I already forgot his name, but Charlie's Grandpa Joe. How Grandpa Joe has clearly just been sandbagging in that bed for who knows how many years, mooching off everyone else to just get up and dance like that. So, we'll say a little underrated.
And he's got coconuts. A personal favorite of mine for this decade is Smokey and the Bandit.
Man, it's a great movie.
You gotta think, you live in a part of the country where people love it and appreciate it, but what about the rest of the world?
Yeah, that's actually exactly what I was thinking. So I'm gonna say that I think Smokey and the Bandit is a little underrated, and I think a lot of people have this really stupid idea of what they think the South is. And Smokey and the Bandit plays on a lot of those tropes. So, like, it's not like it is denying your probably very incorrect about what living in the South, opinion about what living in the South is like. But I think that would also turn a lot of people off from it. I don't want to watch a fucking bunch of hillbillies do whatever for however long. This movie is incredible. It is so much fun. It is one of the most fun movie watching experiences that I can like remember. I was personally surprised by how much I love that movie. I didn't think I was going to dislike it, but I watched it and I was like, this is, if we ever make a list of most rewatchable movies, I don't know if it'll make top 5 or not, but if you gave me a top 10, I might just put Smokey and the Bandit on there. It is an incredibly fun movie to watch.
I went back and forth about putting this one on there because I know your answer. But the world doesn't know your answer about Clockwork Orange.
Oh, that movie's so overrated. I think a lot of people are afraid to talk about Clockwork Orange now because of some of the scenes that are in it. But even when people weren't afraid to talk about it, the movie is not that good. I don't understand what the praise over it is. It has some really good cinematography. I enjoy watching movies in like worlds that are just like really weird and like just enough like our world to where it feels like just an alternate reality. But Clockwork Orange just doesn't do it for me. Like, I feel no sympathy for Alex. Like, there's absolutely nothing in me that makes me think that he has truly changed as a person at all towards the end of it. I think that's actually kind of the point of the movie, but I don't like horror. There are just like so many other better movies to watch than Clockwork Orange. I'm not going to watch Clockwork Orange again.
Will you watch The Jerk?
I like The Jerk.
These cans. Somebody hates these cans.
Yeah. What do I think about The Jerk? I don't know. I think The Jerk's a little underrated. Who's talking about The Jerk anymore? You know? And also, like, man, what is, like, I don't even know what people even think about Steve Martin anymore.
It's great.
Do you?
No.
I mean, he just did Only Murders in the Building. That was really, really good. And he does his stand-up
If
thing.
they're your age, they know him from Cheaper by the Dozen.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I was thinking. And so for that reason alone, I almost got to say any 70s or 80s Steve Martin movie, I feel like I have to say underrated. Because that dude is way funnier and way more adult than what I feel like a lot of people know him for. Because now he's just like going on tour playing banjo, singing joke songs, which is like cool as shit to me. But I grew up with movies like The Jerk and stuff like that. So I think it's a little underrated.
Off topic.
It's also hilarious.
What do you think about The Man with Two Brains?
I don't know what you're talking about.
It's a Steve Martin movie.
Never seen it.
Oh, okay. Well, we started off with the first one. We're going to end with the second one. Godfather Part 2.
Yeah, I mean, it's like really tough. Like, I can't call that movie I can't call that movie overrated. Because it's not. It's an incredible movie. It's a damn near perfect movie. I just like the first one a little bit more, like I said, and I feel like the majority of people say that the second one is a little bit better. I disagree. I would rather spend more time with Michael, and while I definitely think that the flashback scenes with Vito and you get your De Niro in that and all that stuff are important, they definitely add to the story, and they're giving you the roots of all of this and everything. I still just like, to me, the most interesting character and the main character of all this stuff is Michael. So getting to watch his like decline in the first one and how gradual it is and the events that happen to get you there and his relationship with Kay and how that, like, you know, just like the little mini roller coaster that is ultimately just swiftly going downhill in that, to me, that's the better movie. But The Godfather Part 2 is still regarded as one of, if not the best movie of all time. I cannot call it overrated or underrated. It just is what it is. But let me know what you think about these down in the comment section below. What I get wrong, what did I get right? What's your favorite movie from the 1970s? Scroll back up, hit the like button, and subscribe.